welcome back to the Let's Talk podcast with me and David, and today we're going to be talking about 1982's First Blood. This is the Sylvester Stallone starring vehicle that came out in the early 80s that started a franchise of films, but First Blood stands out in the crowd. It is one of the best Vietnam movies ever, and is the other Sylvester Stallone franchise, other than Rocky, that really made a star out of him in the 1980s. And David, I think you said this is actually one of your favorite films, right?
Definitely. The more I actually watch this movie, John, the more I love this film. I always remember like Rambo being about, when I was growing up in the 80s and stuff like that. It was Sylvester Stallone, as you say, his other staple, his other franchise name. There was Rocky and there was Rambo. And I always appreciated this film. Always enjoyed it, but I had it in DVD for years, and then 2 years ago I bought it in Blu-ray, and I just fell in love with it all over again. It's such a fantastic film.
It's funny you said that because I had a very similar experience to it where I remember seeing this as a kid. My dad loves this movie. My dad actually was in the United States Army, so he loves Army films. And, this was a big one for him. He loved this. So this is one I watched when I was a kid, actually watched it with him. One of the rare memories I have watching a movie with my dad, because he's not a big movie guy, but he likes this movie and he likes The Breakfast Club. So those are like movies I remember watching.
All right, okay.
Those are like his movies for some reason,
Big difference.
Yeah, very different movies. I was going to say, I didn't see it a lot until like it came to 4K Blu-ray. I actually took a long time off, and then I got the 4K Blu-ray, and at the time, I thought it was amazing. Sold me on 4K. It hasn't aged too great, the 4K, but it sold me on the 4K format, and ever since I got this 4K Blu-ray, which was like 6 years ago, I think I've seen it 8 times since then. So I keep coming back to it, and I've really learned to love First Blood. And you know what it is what really kind of made me not want to run back to it for so long is the sequels. I really am not a Rambo sequel guy. I don't know how you are with them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that much like other, even though this isn't a horror movie, much like a lot of horror sequels or say movie sequels, they can kind of like overshadow the brilliant originals, like Nightmare on Elm Street. You know what I mean? I think the original gets overshadowed because of the terrible sequels that came along.
No, but beat my high score.
Because Nightmare on Elm Street to me is one of the smartest horror movies ever made, in my opinion. So I think as well, when I was growing up as well, John, it was this idea of Rambo being this kind of tough, muscle-bound guy hogging a big machine gun, mowing people down. And that is not what this movie is. That is what Rambo evolved into, but that is not what First Blood is. First Blood is a very, very smart film. And Sylvester Stallone in this movie, even though he's ripped, he's not as muscle-bound as he would become in the later movies. Part of that is because he had just finished filming Rocky 3, where he'd lost an awful lot of weight for that movie, so he would look smaller beside Mr. T. He's almost like an everyman in this movie, and also to me, this is the first movie that created the modern kind of action star. To me, this is the movie that actually started the Arnold Schwarzeneggers of this world, and also Die Hard. To me, this is the movie that started those type of films. And I know that Die Hard gets an awful lot of praise and stuff for reinventing the action hero, but I'm sorry, it was First Blood. First Blood gets lumped in with the likes of Commandos and the Predators and the Rambo sequels, but this is much more akin with a Die Hard than it does a Commando. And the thing about this movie as well, going back and watch it again, John, for me is that so what I actually like about this movie is that it's a very, very simple premise, very simple look of the film, but it's got an awful lot of layers to it. There's an awful lot going on when you look beneath the surface.
Yes, what it is about this movie that I think separates it, because when you compare this movie, I think, to the Rambo sequels, and you even said it like Commando, the Arnold Schwarzenegger movies of the 80s, I think this movie is more comparable to like movies of the 70s like The Deer Hunter or Coming Home, or even like Born on the 4th of July, where it's more of a study of a character coming home from Vietnam and how they were treated. Vietnam veterans in America were treated horribly when they came back home, whether it be from the right side, the left side, it didn't matter. They were just treated really bad because essentially they got blamed for the war. Meanwhile, They were getting drafted into the war. These people didn't have any choice. And then they just turned him into a killing machine. And then they send him back home to the United States. And as he says in his movies, he can't even hold down a job flipping burgers. So the guy, he's trained to be a killer. Now he's just got to go out there and try and live a normal life again. And he can't. And he can't even get appreciated for the work he did do. And he's just struggling. Everyone he was around is dead. You know, the guy he wants to get in contact with, Troutman, that doesn't respond to him. The only way he gets his attention is by doing what he does in this town.
And that's the thing about the layers in this movie. It is an action movie, but there's an awful lot more going on. And the thing is that Rambo is an anti-hero, okay? And he's the type of anti-hero that we all want to cheer for. It's not original in that fact that he's an anti-hero. We had anti-heroes before that, as you say. There were John, especially in the 1970s. You had films like Dirty Harry.
You've got to ask yourself one question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?
You had Death Wish.
I see the money, man.
You'll have to take it.
What you have now in this is an action hero, anti-hero who is actually going against the establishment. He's not an anti-hero like a Dirty Harry where he's trying to tidy up crime. He's going against his own people as such. And obviously, yes, that is born out of the social issues that was happening in the United States in the 1960s with the civil rights movement and Vietnam. And that's essentially the foundation for the character of Rambo in this film.
Yeah, exactly. That's like the jumping off point into Rambo, because even like in the other Rambo movies, like you said, he's a killer. He's picking up a machine gun, killing people. He doesn't really kill anybody in this movie. You could argue that the one death he causes is accidental, and we built that guy up to be the biggest, piece of shit in the movie anyway.
Come on.
With that one deputy. Yeah. So, like, you kind of felt like you didn't feel too bad for him. Whereas, like, Brian Dennehy, who we haven't talked about yet, who plays, the Sheriff Teasel in this movie. It's funny, with him, Brian Dennehy, he's a big guy, and he plays this guy, and he's a dick in this movie. But the first time I ever saw Brian Dennehy, I don't know if this is... have you ever seen the movie Tommy Boy?
I haven't, no.
No, it's a comedy, and Chris Farley's in it, and his dad is played by Brian Dennehy. And, he plays like this big, lovable guy. And then when I see him in this movie, I can always just think of that big, lovable guy that I have a hard time switching to, like, this guy's just a dick.
Yeah, and do you know what you were saying there as well about he doesn't kill anybody? He doesn't. And I had mentioned to you when we talked about doing First Blood, I've actually started reading the book, and I'm halfway through it. And I actually was sick all last week, so I had every intention of finishing it before we done our stream. And I was sick all last week, so I haven't went back to it again. I haven't been too well. But the thing is that Rambo kills people in the book from the very start. And that was a conscious decision that they wanted to make in the movie, was that what if this guy, Rambo, doesn't kill anybody? What if he's on the edge? He's basically just saying, listen, I could do this, but I'm not going to, because he's more of a lost soul. He's more of a lost character. He doesn't know where he fits in this modern society of, he went off to war to fight for his country. And as you say, John, many people were drafted, and he's come back, and he's being treated like a villain. And even like when he comes into the town, he's wearing the army jacket, and he's got the American flag, and Brian Dennehy, Teasel, says to him, about you walking about here with that badge on there. So the thing is as well, Teasel as well is a Korean war hero. I was listening to the commentary with Sylvester Stallone, and you're saying about this movie, about as many times you've watched it the last few years. I watched this movie during the week, getting ready again for the pod. I was meaning to watch it anyway, because I'm reading the book, and I actually decided to watch it again with the commentary with Sylvester Stallone, and I think this is a few times I've listened to the commentary now. And it's a very, very good commentary, because Stallone's very engaging, and he's funny, and he's, all the things you associate with Stallone when he's been interviewed. He's a very interesting guy.
He's a great interview.
Oh, he's brilliant. And he actually says about his eye, because he came in and he rewrote the script.
Yes.
And his whole idea for Teasel was that Teasel, being a Korean war hero, was that Teasel wasn't getting the same admiration or empathy that the Vietnam War veterans were getting, and that's the way he looked at Teasel. I don't know much about the Korean War, but he says, here's a man who won, and here's a man who didn't, and there I have empathy. So his whole motivation at the start of the movie is, you're in my town, you're no better than me, you don't deserve the sympathy, leave. Yeah. Now, another major difference that I actually noticed as well was it opens up with Rambo going to meet a friend of his, and it turns out he's died from cancer because of Agent Orange. That's not in the book at all so far. I mean, about halfway through, I mean, that's not in the book. The character in the book is just he's just a drifter, drifting from town to town, and this has happened to him in every town. He's been through it of every town, and when he gets through to this town, because of the Teasel's attitude, he decides that he's going to go back.
And doesn't the book also take place in Kentucky, where this one takes place in Oregon? Like the movie's in Oregon and the book's in Kentucky, right?
Oh, you could be right. Oh, do you know what? I can't even remember. I know I already started reading it 2 weeks ago, but I can't remember, John. But you could well be right, yes.
Well, I was listening to a podcast about the movie, and the one guy actually read the book, and he was saying that Rambo's portrayed more as a hippie, and like you said, he kills in the book, while in the movie he doesn't do that. And also, isn't the book from like you're inside his and you're inside Teasel's mind? Like that's like you're kind of getting it from their perspectives.
Yeah.
So
yeah, do you know what? I was gonna finish the book this week for the pod, mate, and I was sick all week, and I couldn't even read. I couldn't even pick up the book. I'm sorry I didn't, but as I say, I'm only halfway through, and they give Teasel more of a backstory, in the book, and it is, and you know that yourself, John, from novels that they can go into what the character's thinking, they can go into more of a backstory, but the whole thing with the book is that Teasel's wife has left him, and he's dealing with that in the book. He's kind of taking his frustration out on this young kid. The guy with the dogs in the movie, if you remember him, he's a very, very small part. He gets shot in the leg. Yeah. Well, in the book, he is Teasel's adopted father.
Oh, really?
He raised Teasel's father died when he was young, and he raised him from when he was young. And there's a conflict between them as well. So there's this whole conflict of the reason Teasel's wife has left him is because he wanted to have kids and she didn't. So there's this whole kind of father-son thing going on between him and Rambo as well. Between Teasel and your young guy and all this. And you're right. I watched the making of First Blood on the Blu-ray, and the guy that actually wrote the book says the reason that he wrote it, he says he wanted to write novels, and the idea came to him was because he was watching the news, and then he was seeing news footage of Vietnam. Then he was seeing news footage of the riots that were going on in America at the time and the hippie movement. And he says he couldn't distinguish between what was happening in Vietnam and what was happening in America, and what would happen if the war was on his own soil. And so he kind of fused all that to kind of concoct this story and create Rambo. Hence you saying he's more of a hippie. That's why he's got the long hair and things like that.
Yeah, because that's kind of how he seems, especially like early in the movie. He's just kind of like drifting around, like you said, like, and it's weird how, especially like living in America now and looking at it in 1982, like how prideful people are with America, especially nowadays. And like back then, like pointing to the badge of the American flag, like, oh, you get in some trouble walking into town like that. It makes you wonder, like, about the whole town. It's like, you live in America. This guy went to Vietnam for your country, and you look at him as somebody who's a nothing. Like, you don't even want him in your town. He's like, there's a diner 32 miles up the road. I'll drive you, then you can walk the rest. But he's like, anything against me getting food in this town? Like, and he's like, yeah. Like, yeah, I'm the law in this town. He feels like he's God. Like, he's got a real, I don't know, not a Napoleon complex, but definitely sociopath, I guess, in a way. I don't know.
Like, like a dictatorship type of thing, authoritarian.
Yeah, like he feels like he's the law in that town, and even if it violates other laws, it's his way. And you see that throughout the movie, because even once the National Guard shows up, the state police show up, once Troutman shows up, it's like, even if they can dissolve the situation and finish it off, and without anyone getting hurt, Teasel's not going to let that happen, because now his pride's been damaged, his ego's been damaged.
Oh, yeah.
He cannot allow Rambo to get one up on him. And then once his buddy dies, his friend, he's been friends with that other sheriff forever, even though that sheriff's a prick, they're friends. And when he dies, that's just adding on to what he's going through.
Oh, yeah. And the whole thing is that you see it from the first scene with Teasel when he comes out of the police station. Everybody knows him. And he's asking him, how are you doing? And they're like, I'm doing good, Sheriff. How are you? And he's, I'm doing good. Everybody knows he's well respected, and as you say, he starts to not lose that respect, but if he's been seen to be second bested by this guy, then he wants to earn that respect back. And you notice that later on in the movie when Troutman comes into it, and before Troutman comes into it, I think it's when one of his officers comes in and says to the National Guard, the head of them, he says, I heard that some of the guys treated this guy pretty bad. And you hear him going, assholes. But you hear Teasel saying to him, he says, look, if you break the law, it's like more of like an excuse. You can't go about breaking the laws. If any of my men done that, I'll deal with them. It says, but you can't go about breaking the law. But it's almost there's just like an excuse. But the whole thing is that you're 100% right in what you're saying there, John. Because say I'm only halfway through the book, and from what I've read in the book, Cecil actually was brought in and he rebuilt the police squad in that town. He rebuilt them from the ground up. And he trained them and all the rest, and this is what is at stake for him. He has a lot of pride in that. And from the very beginning in the novel, when Rambo breaks out of the police station, once he goes into the mountains, it's going out of his jurisdiction. And his whole thing is that he is, and they've been saying from the start, let's bring in the state troops, because it's out of your jurisdiction. There's other police officers are saying that, and he's like, no, we'll get them before they even know about it. And because if they know about it, then my hands are tied. I can't do anything. And that is kind of briefly kind of referenced in the movie, where the actor, he's a very famous actor now, I can't remember his name, with the red hair, says, why don't you let the state?
War hero. That's great. That's
Why don't you
just
shut your
great.
mouth?
Troopers deal with this. Yeah, and then he goes up and he grabs his head and says about his friend who fell out of the helicopter.
Yeah, that's a really young David Caruso. I think that might have been, he was in this and An Officer and a Gentleman that year, and then eventually that guy blows up. He's in King of New York, and then he was really big on NYPD Blue.
Yeah, and then was he in CSI as well?
Oh yeah, which one? I don't know which CSI, but he's on one of them. I think he might be in Miami. I don't know. There's so many CSIs.
Yeah,
I only watched.
I know his face
with William Peterson. That was the only one I ever watched.
Yeah, I never watched that again, but I knew his face from seeing advertisements of CSI. He was always wearing the sunglasses.
Yeah, he loves his son. It's so weird seeing him that young because I'm not used to see he ages pretty fast. Like, because this is 82, and then he really doesn't pop up again until the 90s, and he looks just way older. Yeah, but it's funny seeing him pop up in here. I mean, everyone's kind of got, there's a lot of famouses in this movie, and actually we almost didn't have what's his name is Troutman. Who was the actor who plays Troutman?
Yes. Oh, what's his name? Richard Crenna? Yeah.
Yeah. We almost didn't have him. They almost had what's his name? Not Kirk Douglas.
It was Kirk Douglas.
Yeah. And did you ever read why they didn't have Kirk Douglas in the movie, and they actually had to having to replace him at the very end? Like Richard Kenna, when he comes in, he is getting fed the lines from the first day. The first time he shows up, he's being fed the lines by a PA because he just got there. He didn't even have time to learn the lines because they just had gotten. They were going through people because of what happened with Kirk Douglas. Kirk Douglas apparently wanted to change the character, have the movie end with, I guess Rambo dying and then him surviving. And like he would look in the mirror and he would have the headband on. And apparently Stallone shot that one down.
If I was able to watch the making of, and I was watched it again last night and listened to the commentary, and in the making of, it's an old making of. It must be like 20 years old. I don't know, but
it looks like it's ripped from a DVD.
Yeah, exactly. It was like the 20th anniversary. There's something I think it was come out in the early 2000s. But they said about Kirk Douglas, wanting to change the ending that Rambo died. And apparently that's the end in the book. Spoiler alert. But that was filmed because that deleted scene is on the Blu-ray. So I'm kind of like, why did they film it? If Kirk Douglas left because they didn't want to kill Rambo, then why did they film it? But then when I listened to the commentary with Stallone, there was more to it. The whole thing was that Kirk Douglas was going to kidnap Rambo, and then Rambo would get into a car to escape the police station. He'd look in his rearview mirror, and Kirk Douglas was behind him. And then Rambo would wake up, and he was like handcuffed to a radiator. And then he went into this about he ended up snapping Rambo's neck by standing on his head. Apparently, Stallone went, no, that's not going to happen. So he left the project at the last minute, and they brought in Richard. What's his name? How do you say his surname? Crenna. Richard Crenna. But he says he working on another show where he was playing a gay fella, and when he came in, that's why he was wearing the trench coat, because they didn't have proper clothes for him, because he's a lot taller than Kirk Douglas, and he's wearing Kirk Douglas's outfit, and it was pretty short on him, so they got him this big long trench coat. And this is when he was saying the lines, he wasn't like forceful enough or tough enough. And Stallone says, "No, you gotta give it a wee bit more kind of oof, when you're talking, you're a military guy here now. You know what I mean? You're giving out orders. You're an authority." And that's why he delivers his lines like that. Which when I first started watching this again the other night, intently watched it for our podcast and listening to it, I just thought, Jesus, he just reminds me like something out of the A-Team.
Oh my god, especially with the hat.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a beret. Like, yeah, it does look like something right out of the A-Team. Although, that is my favorite scene in the movie. One of my favorite things you can ever do in any movie is when you build up the character, like when people are underestimating somebody. Like, they think they have the upper hand, and it's like, no, you really don't have the upper hand. You don't know who that guy is. Like, when he says to him,
God didn't make Rambo. I made him.
I didn't come here to save him from you guys. I came to save you guys from him. Like, I love that. Like, that
Yeah.
the John Wick franchise has done that. Anytime you can just build a character up by just saying, yeah, no, this guy's a badass. Do not screw around with him. You don't know who you're messing with. That guy is a trained killer. I always love that aspect of any film. But it works so
Yeah.
well in this one, too. I love that whole speech he gives about what Rambo is.
Yeah, and then when he says, if you go in there after him, don't forget one thing. And he says, what's that, Colonel? And he says, a good supply of body bags. It's so good. And there is cheesiness in this movie, but it's so, so good. And, you know, even when I was watching the commentary, and Stallone said himself that the scene where the National Guard have him trapped in the cave.
Oh my god.
And he said, and even Stone says himself, if there's one bit of this movie, he says, this is like a sitcom here. He says, but I suppose I'm in it. He says, so I suppose it's okay, but I don't really like this. But he goes on to say, but the rest of the movie works, so it's fine.
Yeah, that's like the one lighthearted movie moment in this movie, and a lot of that is just to do with how, especially in the 80s, it's a little less, but the National Guard is always seen as like the one branch of the U.S. military that's seen as like kind of jokes. They don't really see action. They're just really here if something happens in the United States. That's why, like, they're weekend warriors. Like, the one guy even said, I gotta be back at the drugstore tomorrow. He's like, well, clean it up. Like, they gotta get started working.
That's right, yes.
You know?
That's right.
Because they're just
But
regular
that's what I mean.
guys with a little bit of training. That's it.
Yeah, they're not going to be, I mean, okay, Rambo's supposed to be this, you know, as you were saying there, he's the best of the best, you know what I mean? He can take out all these guys, and these guys are just normal Joes doing a 9 to 5, and then this come into their town and they're being asked to deal with it. And I think that when Brian Dennehy comes back into that area after he's stuck in the cave and they think he's dead, he reins it back in again to me, because he is saying to these guys, "You're ridiculous."
Told you a fortune? Damn it! What the hell do you think this is? Some kind of a circus? Get the hell out of here!
Yeah, do you know what I mean? That's what he's basically saying, because he gave them orders and they didn't obey by his orders, and they're lying as well. I love the way they turned and say, "What do you want us to do?" He was shooting at us, but they were shooting at him first. He didn't turn and fire back until they started shooting, and that reminds me as well about the lies. One of the funniest bits in the movie to me, even shook my head on laughing. And some things never change, John. About when the media said about only for the police's
Bravery,
the police
I think.
bravery and being well trained, it saved their lives. I mean, he took every single one of them out.
Yeah, they didn't do anything. And that was definitely like them, the cops. It was probably Teasel who probably told them what happened and lied through his teeth and said, no, yeah. We saved the day. Like, we got him out of here. Yeah, he escaped your custody because you guys just would not stop pushing him, like he even says. And actually, speaking of Teasel, I didn't notice this. Somebody else pointed this out to me. It was another podcast. But once you hear it, Teasel has an obsession with people either taking baths or showers in this movie.
Morning, Dave.
Hi, Sheriff.
Want to take a bath this week?
If you want some friendly advice, a haircut and take a bath.
He's always telling somebody to get cleaned up, or he really wants Rambo to clean up, shave his beard, wash up. Like, and the first thing he says to that guy who says, in like when he's walking through town, when he's getting in his police car, he's like, "You gonna take a bath this week?" Like, you know.
Yes, right enough, because I noticed that as well when I watched it again the other night. I was like, oh, I said that you're going to take a bath. But I knowing that later on, that's one of my favorite lines when he says about if you want some advice, take a bath and cut that hair.
So Teasel must have like an obsession with people getting washed up. He's like, you know, if you're gonna be in my town, you're gonna be clean cut. You're gonna shave and you're gonna look good. Like, you can't have a 5 o'clock shadow or nothing like that.
Yeah, there's me and you, John. We'd be in trouble there if he seen us right now. I'm not a shaving days. You've got that beard.
I always got a beard. I haven't had no beard since I was 18 years old. You don't want to see me without a beard. I have a very small cleft chin. It'll look weird.
I'm just being lazy. That's all I'm doing right now. But yeah, but wonder is that supposed to come from his background of being in the army and being, you know what I mean, being in the Korean War and things like that.
That makes sense now that you told me that. Yeah, that like it's about like he has a clean cut image that people are supposed to abide, and especially if you were in the army. It was Vietnam was like the first thing, the first war where they kind of stopped with that like clean. It was a very dirty war in general. People came back messed up, like World War II, and then I'm not, I know about the Korean War, but it was kind of a smaller war. But like with people from World War II to Vietnam, the image of soldiers just changed so much.
It probably did but part of it was probably because of the draft as well.
Yeah, you're just sending regular people over there now, people who aren't volunteering to go in. Like you're just taking people from their regular lives and saying, "Hey, you're gonna go over here." And to make it worse, it was a losing war, so it wasn't even like it was a war that was won. You were just basically sending people over there to die, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, okay. I mean, there was a lot of people drafted probably for previous wars, as in First World War, Second World War, but I think society was completely different then because men might have had a moustache or something like that. Very few men probably had beards, stubble.
Yeah.
There were a bit different time. People dressed in suits and things like that, wore bowler hats and things,
Oh,
But by the
hats.
time they got the hats, back in the 40s or whatever, the 20 or the teens, and
Yeah.
but then by the time you get to the 60s, the world was changing, whereas you say the hippie era was coming in. So, and I think that they ended up having to draft an awful lot of Americans into that war. As you say, it was a losing war. There was an awful lot of it was hearts and minds war, I think. I think that a lot of the American public were the tide was starting to turn, where they were asking questions about why we were there, what are you doing there? Why are these young kids coming back dead and maimed? I think television had a lot to do with it. I think it was the first televised war. It was on people's television screens in the evenings when they were sitting having their dinner, families with their children sitting beside them and thinking, "Are you going to be next?" And I think that I think that if this is just me surmising, talking about how it looks and stuff, John. I think the last thing they were thinking of was shave that beard.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But I know if you've seen movies like Full Metal Jacket, the very first scene is they're all being shaved and they're having their heads shaved.
Oh yeah, and you got to have the crew cut, and when you're in the army, so that's like the thing, I guess. But you know what it was? It's just there was a lot of free for all, a lot of just unchecked people in Vietnam. Just people were just going there. Like you've seen plenty of Vietnam movies, but like even when you hear true stories about like what happened there, it's just not that organized. You were able to get dropped off there, and then you were just kind of trying to survive for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then,
Well, I think that it was soon kind of caught on to that. It was just, as you say, I think the Americans knew they couldn't win it.
No.
And it was just, you were just being sent there to survive.
Well, that's where all the conspiracy theories come in, and a lot of them have been like kind of confirmed true. Like obviously with movies like JFK, they're exploring that. Like Oliver Stone is very that's why he makes all those more anti-Vietnam War movies. Like he made Platoon, Born on the 4th of July, JFK. The reason why he makes all those movies is because he went to Vietnam, and he is still to this very day bitter about that he had to go to Vietnam and like what he saw over there. And like how he feels like his country betrayed him by sending him and everybody else over there, which he believes essentially were for gun sales. And like you said, like it was easier in the 1940s, like to get people to go to war because there wasn't television. It's propaganda. You could tell people it's not that bad over there. People want to be heroes, and that was still going on with Vietnam. But then it's like I want to be. The Deer Hunter explores this a little bit better. People wanting to go over there, but not realizing what's really over there.
Yeah, I mean, like one of my favorite, probably is my favorite war film. It's definitely up there. Is Platoon, and the opening scene's been a while since I watched it. Actually, and Charlie Sheen, they asked him about going to Vietnam, and he actually says in this first scene that he signed up himself. And some of the ones that were drafted are kind of saying like, really? I think that opening scene is the helicopter coming down, and you see all the body bags down there.
Oh, my God,
yeah. Platoon's a great movie, John. And wouldn't want to compare, World War II or World War One to Vietnam. Do you know what I mean? I think Vietnam's a very divisive war. Do you know what I mean? I think a lot more people are on the side now of saying that it wasn't just, but fighting the Nazis was. But you're right about it. I think that the horrors of war wasn't being beamed into people's living rooms every evening during Second World War. But obviously this side of the pond, there was a lot of places getting shelled.
Yeah.
So, people felt like they had no choice, they had to.
Yeah, well, World War II especially had a clear-cut villain of, like, we could separate it into black and white, whereas, like, the Vietnam War, it's like trying to figure out who the villain is. Like, what are we doing in a country that really, we didn't need to be there, and why were we there for so long? It didn't make sense. Like, we had to fight in World War II because the entire world's fighting, and we had people trying to take over this planet, so you had to fight. Everybody had to fight. It made sense. That's why it's a World War. We had to stop what was going on. If we didn't, then we're going to allow this power to keep rising up. No, we got to cut it off at the knees.
Yeah, and it was, exactly. They were invading, Second World War, they were an invading force, and they're carrying out atrocities and war crimes and all the rest throughout Europe. So I think that was, like you said, it's a wee bit more clear cut.
Yeah, this movie is, it's kind of just piggybacking that, but it's not a war film. It's just taking the war themes, and now Rambo's essentially, because he's just so traumatized, we see the PTSD in him, that's like when he grabs him, and then he remembers himself like being on the cross, and then that's what sets him off. And this is one of probably the first movies to even explore PTSD, and they don't even realize that that's what's going on in him. He doesn't, like, no one else can understand. They think he's just a psycho. That's what what's his name, Mitch, who David Caruso plays, keeps saying. He's like, can't you tell this guy's a psycho? Yeah,
and that's the whole thing as well, is that, see, we're talking about a time. So this movie the book came out in 1970, I think, so it was written in the late 60s, when the war was still going on, and it took them so long to get it made. And as I say, I think the likes of the Deer Hunter and stuff and Apocalypse Now was the reason why somebody took a chance on it, because originally they didn't want to make it because of the topic of the Vietnam War, because it was still very sensitive in America. When I was watching the making of, they said that people wouldn't want to see this movie because they're trying to forget about that, just like the Vietnam War veterans were forgot about. Do you know what I mean? And eventually, it was correctly, eventually took a chance on it, and even Stallone himself said he didn't know if he wanted to make it. Apparently, it had been turned down by everybody in Hollywood. Every A-list actor in Hollywood had turned it down. He eventually thought that there's something to this, and when the first day he turned up on set, he said himself, "What am I doing here? I shouldn't be doing this." He thought his career was going to be over. A lot of that had to do as well with the conditions. But like you're saying about David Caruso, you're saying about this guy's crazy. When they find out he's a Green Beret, he goes and he's had all these like honors. He says, "I knew there was something about that guy." No, you thought he was crazy earlier.
Yeah, he's like, great, great. The guy's a war hero.
Yeah, and just going back to saying there before I forget, it goes out of my head about Stallone actually said about you're saying about Vietnam and stuff like that. And eventually, Rambo became a poster boy for like right-wing politics in America in the 80s. And Sylvester Stallone says that was never the intent. And he says, and he never was, he says he was neither. And he says, because this came about at a time where the Democrats were still in charge and Reagan was starting to come to the fore. And we actually thought that we would be hated for it, the film. But the thing was that Rambo isn't pro-military, he's anti-military, and they took him then and used him as the poster boy of the American Army later in the 80s.
Yeah, people always misread things like that. I mean, it's pretty damn obvious when you look at it. He feels like his government used and abused him and spit him out. They used him as a tool. They made him a weapon. That's all they did. And that's all he's good at. And that's what kills him, is that they made him a weapon, and then when he came back to America, they left him. And they left his whole group. Everyone's dead. He's like, yeah, and then that's one thing that Troutman said, no, Barry's alive. He's like, no, he's not. He's like, he died.
Yeah.
So it's like you weren't even keeping tabs on how they were all doing anyway. You just like you built these guys up, and he acts like it's his toy, like Troutman almost. He's like wants to go in there and get his boy back. He wants to make sure that he's protected and alive because if they ever need him again, they want him alive. You want to be able to use him, which is essentially what the sequels are. But he doesn't want to see him die. That's why he smiles when like they think he's dead, and Troutman sees the smoke going up out there. So he's like, all right, I know he didn't die. He's out there somewhere.
Yeah, and Brian Dennehy is 100% right when he says you're only hanging about because you knew he was alive and you wanted to see what happened. And the whole thing is as well, which Stallone points out too, is that he says people always miss is when Troutman says to Dennehy, I've a 50% chance. He thinks of me like family. He says, and that's all the age I need. And Stallone says, that's Troutman saying that if you want me to take him out, I can do it. But even Tassel doesn't make the connection because Tassel then tells him to do one. And he's like, what kind of people are you, remember? And then walks out. I think Brian Dennehy is absolutely brilliant in this film.
Oh, Brian Dennehy is awesome in this movie. I love him in this movie. He's perfectly cast because, he's just the way because he is kind of emotional. It's weird. Like when eventually Rambo does sneak up on him and he could have killed him and how he breaks down crying. You're like, you kind of get the sense that this character, there's so many layers to him. Like, he acts like this big tough guy, but it's all a facade. Like it's the badge is an image, and it's an image that he wants to maintain as the power of this town. But really, he has no competition to Rambo, and Rambo knows that. That's why he doesn't kill him. It'd be like him picking on weak people. He keeps trying to tell him, "Stop pushing me, and this is over." And but Teasel cannot. He cannot allow himself to be viewed as weak to the people in his town. He has to still be that authority figure. He cannot allow this guy to not only. That's why I think at the end where he's like, "You can kill me," is because like, what am I going back to now? They're gonna know I'm weak.
Yeah, and Stallone kind of said in his commentary that Teasel's not married, so that's a change they made from the book. So it's interesting to see. I'm interested to see how the book's going to pan out in relation to his wife and the kids, because obviously that's something which they streamlined for this movie. Though Stallone says the original cut of this movie was like 3.5 hours, and apparently it didn't work, and it was really bad, and they had to re-edit it down to an hour and a half, and it was only when they re-edited it down to an hour and a half and put the score in that it actually worked. So I'm wondering how much of that was in the original cut. But you're right, John. Here's a man that has nothing but his town. He doesn't have anything but his town and the respect of the people in his town. And once that's taken away from him, he's a desperate man. And he will do anything to try and get that back.
Exactly. That's what he is. He's just desperate to get to prove himself. And that's funny because, like, when you were just saying about how, I guess in this movie he doesn't have a wife, so that's not in there. But you can tell, like, his personal life is really nothing. It's whatever it is, even though it's not said directly in the movie, but you could just tell just the kind of person he is. Also, he's like the other deputy. I always forget whatever his name is, the one who ends up dying, who's really pushing Rambo.
Sorry, the guy that fell out of the helicopter?
Yeah, the guy who has that southern accent in this movie.
I think his character name's Galt.
Or Galt, something like that.
Yeah, it's spelled in the book. It's spelled Gault, Galt.
Yeah, that guy he's 10 times even worse than Teasel. Like that guy has nothing. Like that guy has a mean streak in him. And even Mitch says that, like when he's like, "I'll smash your face," and Mitch is like, "He will." Like like don't mess with that guy, because Mitch is like the honest one throughout this entire one, the one who David Caruso plays. He's kind of like the one like watching all this happen and realizing that this all could just be avoided. There is no reason that this had to happen. Even on Rambo's part, like as much as like at the very beginning, if Rambo would have just walked the other way and just took the shit from Brian Dennehy, he just didn't want to take the shit. He could have just took it and just kept walking, but he was just fed up with it. That's why he puts his collar up and just like in defiance walks back that way and basically allows him to arrest him, even though what's he arresting him for? Exactly.
And Rambo, is the fact that his friend is dead. To me, that's what made him switch. I think if he was passing through and Brian and Danny or Tassel told him to go, he'd be like, okay. But if his friend was alive, he'd be maybe a wee bit more happier spirits. But I love that scene in the police station, as you say, about Galt when they basically start torturing him. Do you know what I mean? They're abusing their position. They start torturing him. He hits him with the baton and he kicks him, and then they strip him down and start firing him with the hose.
Don't forget to get him behind the ears.
And they're going to cut his hair. And that fight down in the basement is amazing, right?
Oh my God.
It's so good.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And then once Rambo goes up, I start laughing, but because it's like Rambo's in full war mode now. But he's
naked.
Caught. Yeah. Well, in the book he is actually naked, but in this he's got his tank top and his jeans. But the thing is that by the time he gets upstairs, he's in full war mode. He even grabs his knife on the way out. He's thinking, I'm going to need that later on. I'm going to need that knife. But the thing is that he starts taking everybody out in the police station, but they're all kind of caught off unawares. I'm not saying they would put him a better fight, but they are. They're kind of like, whoa. And he's like, bang. Do you know what I mean? I love the guy that walks into the police station with the boxes. I don't know what's in them boxes, whether it's coffees and donuts or is it more Christmas decorations. But he does this. He's like, whoa. And he scrapes his leg and then hits him with the elbow. Stallone says he broke his nose in real life.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
If you ever look for the rest of the movie, if you see that guy, he has a bandage on his nose. Because actually a lot of people got hurt in this movie. Stallone broke a rib because he fell out of that tree for real. And because Stallone did that, Brian Dennehy felt bad, and he did the thing where he has to fall, and he also got really hurt.
Yes.
Because Brian Dennehy felt guilty.
Yes, that's right. And And that was the whole thing. Like, it actually reminded me, John, of when we done Raiders of the Lost Ark, and we talked about the fact of the guys being out in the desert and, you know, under that heat, and they're really sweating, and you know what I mean, and you can see it in their performances. Well, this is the exact same, only it's the opposite. They were in Canada filming this, and they were out in the freezing cold, and Stallone done a lot of his own stunts, and he ended up with so many injuries. He nearly got his hand blown off by a squib as well when he goes into the cave. Yeah, if you watch it again, see when he goes into the cave, there's a bit of wood going across the cave, and he puts his hand on it to bounce over it. And as he bounces over it, the squib goes off, and he says he thought it blew his thumb off. But you're right, he hurt his ribs, and he said crawling up those rocks, and even when he was climbing down the side of the cliff, he says he walked out to the edge, and there was just moss. He said to the crew, "Listen, there's moss here, I could slip off here." And they were like, "Well, we'll tie your ankle." And he says, but he looked back, he says, the rest of the crew tied themselves to the trees. But he says, if I fell over the side, he says, I was still probably going to die if I hit in the rocks. And he even crawled over the side. He says, but there was a 15-foot drop, he says, but a bit of a shelf. He says, so I would have only fell about 15 feet. It would have been okay.
15 feet is still painful.
Yeah, what if he bounced or rolled and went down the other, whatever, 70 feet?
I have fallen off a 6-foot loading dock on my face. That hurt like hell. I can't imagine 15 feet into the cold ground too, the winter ground. No, and that's actually one thing about this movie that I love. I love that it's overcast through the entire film. It's either at night or it's overcast. It gives it a unique look because the rest of the movies are, you know, in the sunny deserts. Really, and this is only one of the only ones that takes place actually in a different place, and it's, you know, it's the jungle almost. And I love the way this movie looks. And I have to ask you, because you brought it up already, the Jerry Goldsmith score.
See, before I go to the score, see what you're saying there about how it looked. I was thinking the exact same thing. I mean, well, I was thinking more about it last night when I was watching the commentary, but it's something which I love about this film. You know, I've probably just subconsciously loved it. And what you were saying there about the go and I laugh when you said about the sequels are in the sunny locations, that's probably Stallone wrote them, I think, and I think he's thinking, I'm not going back to that cold again.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, because like he said about, see the tarp that he gets, and he cuts the tarp up. He says in the original script, he says for some reason they wrote that Rambo was in a tank top. Now in the book, he's naked for a long section of that, and he ends up getting clothes, right? But he's wearing a tank top in the movie, and he says that once he was out there in the freezing cold, he's seen that was a real rag that he found, and says, "What if I put this on?" And he cut it up and he put it on, and later on the cop gulped when he remember he lifts him and he's dead, and he takes his coat off him. Like, Rambo doesn't put it on, and he says people's probably thinking, why does Rambo not put that jacket on? He says because the intention was to wear it, but he says he liked the tarp better, so he kept it on. He thought it looked cooler. But he says if he rewrote it again, he would have had Rambo escape with more than just a tank top on. Because it was absolutely freezing.
Yeah, he really backed himself in a corner with that one. But you probably don't think about that when you're writing in a nice warm room. You got a cup of whiskey next to you, a candle. You're like, it'll be fine. And when you get out there and it's raining and it's freezing, you're like, made a mistake.
Yeah. And then you saying about the actual bit of overcast, they were saying, like, you know, you can see there's scenes when they're in the woods, and that's real mist. You know, that goes back to what we were saying about Raiders and movies like that, even Batman to a certain extent, because that was filmed on a backlot, but it was filmed outside. You know, and that backlot was built outside, John, in the dead of winter. So when they're in the real woods and you see the real kind of mist coming down, that's real. It's not fake. They're not in there with smoke machines, and that's what today's movies are missing. And that's what I'm saying about the honesty and the authenticity that this movie brings. And even Stone said himself he doesn't think they would make a movie like that today, and he was probably crazy for doing it. Thankfully he did it, because it's a great film.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we cannot go backwards, but, you know, them having to shoot on location with the money that they have, and this is what they had to do. They had to deal with these issues, but we wouldn't get a movie like this. We wouldn't get that real fog. We wouldn't get that overcast. They wouldn't think to do that. Like, you know, if they put rain in a movie now, it's like, okay, they're on a set and it's that ridiculous amount of rain where it's, you know, never seen rain like fall like that, or they would shoot it with a green screen behind them and they'll edit all that stuff in later. We'll shoot it on a safe set where it's a controlled environment, which is good for the actors and everybody working. I'm sure it's 10 times better work environment. I don't want these people to go through hell. But on the other hand, look what the results are in comparison. You know, you get something like this, which is an amazing film.
Which feels real, John. It feels real because it was kind of real, even though they're movie making. All that's real. I'm sure Stallone was acting through that pain, and he was acting through the cold. But his character is also dealing with the pain and the cold, and you can see it in his face. Like when he goes into the cave, he actually said that was a real cave, and most of it was filmed in the cave, but some of it wasn't. So that's fair enough, right? It goes to a set for some of that, probably where the rats and all were. That was probably the part where they done on a set. But there's a bit where he falls down the steps inside the cave, and he says he's holding his arm where he has the cut. Remember the fake cut?
Yeah.
And he says,
good
he
special
says,
effects, by the way.
"Oh, it looks so good." He tells a story about that as well. I don't know if you read it, but I'll talk about it in a second. And he says that when he's holding his arm like that, he says he was pretending that his arm was sore. He says where he cracked his ribs from falling through the trees, he hurt them again when he went down them steps, and he's actually holding his ribs with his arm. And going like that, the pain is his ribs, but he's pretending it's his arm. So there's all that as well. He says that when he had that special effect on his arm with the blood, he decided to go to the emergency room with it. There was a device under his arm which pumped the blood, and he went into the emergency room and he told him that he cut himself. And there's anything they could do for him, and they actually thought it was real. And they actually just says, just give me painkillers, and he took the painkillers and he left.
Took the painkillers, of course.
and he left. But what you were saying there about the Jerry Goldsmith score, this is part of the reason why I absolutely love this movie. I find with me, my favourite movies, part of my reason for loving certain movies is the scores that go along with it, and this is one of my favourite scores. 100%. I actually bought it last year. I even love the song. It's so good.
The song at the end with the closing credits.
Long road when you're on your own.
Well, yeah, the song at the end's a bit cheesy, but yeah, but the play instrumental version at the very start when the movie starts and he's walking down to his friend's house.
I love that opening way they do that, because it gives it kind of like a warmness, like an emotion, like a little. You kind of start building that emotion, especially we're going into a scene where he's gonna find, because that's the only time you actually get to see Rambo a little bit happy, is like him talking about his buddies.
Yes,
that's the only time, and he's like telling the story about his friend who just died and like how he was too big, and then it's sad because he's like she was the one picking him up. He basically died a shell of himself. That makes it even sadder.
Yeah, the man that he knew. You heard him saying about. He was so big. We had to put him at the back. He said something along the lines of, we had to put him at the back because he was so big, or we wouldn't have been able to fit the picture. So that tells you that this was a hulking, big, strong man. And then she said about, I could pick up this small woman, says I could pick him up. So he was whittled down to nothing. And I think that really had an effect on Rambo. And then he hands her the picture and says, I'm sorry. He couldn't even take the picture with him. Hands her the picture and walks off. But yes, you're right. I love that where you see him. It's like when the movie first starts, a film called First Blood. I mean, what does that mean? First Blood. What does that mean? And then the next thing is, you see the poster, maybe him with a machine gun and all the rest. But it starts off, he's walking down. It's got this, like you say, very nice kind of music. When he comes down, and I love that opening shot where it shows the wee house and the lake, and it's all nice. And it's just, I love that opening to the movie.
It is a beautiful opening of the movie. So the one thing we got to talk about before we wrap up is the ending to this movie, because I think it's a beautiful ending. And they were originally, like you said, they shot it. They were going to kill him off, but, they decided, they saw the money signs in there, and there was no way they were going to end this one with Sylvester Stallone dying. So they actually have Troutman go in there after Teasel, he gets really hurt. He doesn't kill him, but Troutman goes in there to talk him down. And then we get this big emotional monologue from Sylvester Stallone.
You drive a tank. I was in charge of $1 million equipment. Back here, I can't even hold the job. Fucking guys!
And this is why I've said in the past, as much as I love Arnold Schwarzenegger, and if you're going to compare the two, Arnold's my guy, but Arnold Schwarzenegger could never pull off a monologue like Sylvester Stallone does at the end of this movie.
Yeah, exactly. The only thing is there about, they did film the scene where he died, and you can watch it, and it tested horribly. Now, I don't know whether or not maybe Sylvester Stallone did have in the back of his mind sequels. But where do you go with this? I mean, I don't know. It would be interesting. I need to watch. Look, I like Rambo 2. Not a big fan of 3. Enjoyed 4. I haven't seen 5, but they do get more ridiculous, as we said. So I'm not 100% sure. I must watch 2 again just to see what their thoughts were about a sequel, because it is, even though I do like 2, it is a lot more ridiculous than this movie. That's the thing I like about this movie, is John talked about how realistic it looks. The whole time that Stallone was talking in his commentary was, could a guy do this? Could a guy break out of jail? Could a guy take on 3 guys and beat them up like that? When he's in the woods, could a guy take it out? And that's what I love about this movie. It's the realism of the way he sets the traps. He lures them guys in and he takes them out one by one. So everything in this movie is realism. It's something that you think could be done in regards to what you're. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say that's what makes it. What helps that is that it's in a small town, so these regular sheriffs are. They're not the most trained guys. That's why you bring in the state police and the National Guard, because sheriffs in a small town, they don't expect somebody like this. When something like this happens, you call in the big dogs, because a guy like this could take them out. And that's what I like. It's like, because for the most part, this movie takes place in this small town. With, the town is so small that they can actually, I don't know if they have these in your town, but I've never seen anything like it, that they can actually do a mass messaging system with speakers throughout the whole town. I've never seen a town like that. That's how small this town is.
Yeah, that's how small it is. That's right at the end where they say evacuate. Yeah. The older I get, I like smaller, would you say intimate movies? I love movies where there's just 6 or 7 characters. Do you know what I mean? Just interacting and a story plays out. Do you know what I mean? I love wee movies like that. But the thing is that you were saying, so I'm not ignoring what you said to me earlier about Stallone delivering that at the end of the movie, and that was the whole thing. But the whole thing was it builds up to this, doesn't build up to this big mad fight between him and the state police outside. And again, it's small and intimate. It's in that police station. It's Troutman and it's Rambo, and then you've got Teasel injured on the floor. Probably passed out.
Oh yeah,
and he's lying on the ground thinking, "Fuck! I wish I had just let him stay."
He's he's like, I've done enough now. That's it. He's like, if I didn't die yet, I'm just staying here.
Yeah, he's probably looking at his police station, going, "Jesus, look at the state of it now." So yeah, it builds up to this speech. Stallone does a brilliant job, of delivering that speech, and I just do you know what I like it. I find it a wee bit rambly, but I have to listen to what he's saying. But that's okay because it isn't a guy reciting Shakespeare. It's a guy who's been traumatized by war, and you do have to kind of listen to what he's telling you. Because what he's actually telling us is a traumatizing event in his life.
Event. It's horrible what happened to him. How his friend, he basically got tricked. The kid was asking them to shine shoes, and I guess in the shoe shine box, was an actual bomb. So he went over to get 2 beers.
It's a bomb.
And then his friend got blown up by the shoe shine box, and because he was just so disoriented and shocked that the guy doesn't even realize that his legs blew off, and Rambo's so shocked too that he's trying to put it all together, and he's looking for the guy's legs, like that's gonna fix him, but that just telling you the horrors of war, and it like almost becomes like a therapeutic scene, like like how you hold in your emotions for so long, and then it just eventually has to come out. Like he's like on the like almost like crying. He can't keep it all in anymore. It's just coming out of him, and he's pouring his heart out to Troutman, who was a father figure to him. Like that was his dad in war. But of course, like any dad or any cold dad, he doesn't like get down there and give him the hug. He just kind of puts his arm on his shoulder and lets him cry into his chest.
Yeah, I mean, Rambo breaks down. Rambo then throws the weapon away, and he vents his frustration that he was able to operate multi-million-pound equipment in the war, and now he can't get a job parking cars. Yep. Whereas Troutman actually said to him earlier, says to Teasel, let him escape, leave a gap, let him escape, and then you'll pick him up, I think he says in Canada or something, or somewhere else. He says you pick him up somewhere else washing cars. Rambo later on says, I can't even get a job parking cars. So it contradicts what Troutman actually thinks that his soldiers are doing after the war. And as you said earlier, John, as well, about Troutman, he's not that he should have to, but he's not keeping up the current affairs with his ex-soldiers, but he'll come and call them when he needs them, because they're soldiers. And he's got a nice cushy job in Washington. He makes a joke about it. I'm shining a chair with my backside, which is another great line. But he's got a cushy job up there, and the soldiers don't. And you're right, then Rambo breaks down, and like you say, he becomes childlike in that moment where he needs support. He's no longer gonna be carrying on his war in this town. But the thing you said as well about the story is how the guy that blew up in Vietnam, his friend in the bar, he was always talking about getting back home to, I think he said Las Vegas, didn't he?
I think that's what he said.
Yeah, taking his car out for a drive, blew up. He was in that much shock. He actually said that, I just want to go home, Rambo, and drive my car. And he said, well, I can't find your legs. You have no legs.
Yeah, he can't find his leg. Can you imagine seeing that? And And the darkness, like these are young guys. That's one thing I mean, I don't know how it is in your country, but my dad would always tell me stories like, he joined the army when he was 17. And like, you can go over there, drink, and they give you guns and everything. You come back to the United States, and the drinking age is 21. It's like you can't have a drink, but I was just over fighting, overseas in other countries. I'm allowed to do it. You put a gun in my hand, but I can't get a drink.
Yeah.
It's like very similar to that. Like you train me to fire all these weapons, but I can't come back here and get a regular job now. Like you've trained me to do all this, but I can't do this. It makes no sense.
Yeah. No, I know what you're saying. Like, yeah, but drinking age here is 18. But no, I understand what you're saying. Like you can train somebody to go to another country and kill someone, but when you come home, you can't have a beer.
Yeah, exactly. I don't get the, I can go all the way to the other side of this planet, and you trust me to do that, and fight someone, kill someone, but if I want to have a beer with my buddy, I'm too young for that.
Yeah. It's hypocrisy, is that, but that's, life's full of that.
Yeah, it's a contradiction, if I've ever seen one.
Mm-hmm.
So you got anything else you want to say about Rambo?
No, I don't really have anything else to say about it, other than I think it's a fantastic movie. Like I said earlier at the start of the stream, mate, I grew up with Rambo always kind of pop culture ways in my life. Do you know what I mean? And I think everybody's idea of Rambo is, say, the muscle-bound man running about with a machine gun, shooting things down. But this movie's much, much more than that. And I appreciated it for years, but now I actually love it. And I don't know, it'd probably be in my top 20 movies of all time. If I was down to make a list, I would have to put it maybe in my top 20.
I've always said it, and I'll say it again. This is by far my favorite Sylvester Stallone movie, and I think this movie would be in my top 20 to 30 movies all time, too. And it's funny because, like you said, it was a 3.5-hour cut. I mean, this movie clocks in, just over 90 minutes, and it's incredible how paced it is. There's nothing more you can cut. It's clean. Like, it's perfectly cut, this movie. For an early 1980s movie, just before we get into the action-packed movies of the late 1980s, we kind of have it like this in-between phase where it's not slow like a 70s movie, but it's also not that kinetic cocaine 80s feel. It's like it's perfectly edited.
It is. You could say it is an almost perfect movie. And the other thing I would say as well is that I am thoroughly enjoying the novel at this moment in time. I will finish it the next week or so, hopefully. And I would advise anybody who loves this movie to read the book, because the book is thoroughly enjoyable as well.
Just got back into audiobooks so I could listen to some at work instead of me always having to listen to podcasts. So just found an app that you can it apparently connects to your library, so you could take books out, but audiobooks through an app on your phone now. So Fate's been doing that, and I'm going to start doing that, and it's free. So I can take this book out for free, which is crazy.
Yeah, I would advise you, give it a listen. I'm thoroughly enjoying the book. I probably would have had it finished, only I was sick this week. So I'm looking forward to getting back into it again.
Yeah, I'm glad you got better. You don't sound too sick yet, right now.
It was just more of a few days thing, you know what I mean? So still just getting over it. But I had a headache for about 5 days.
It's awful.
So a wee bit of a bug or something. Yeah.
Headache's the one thing you can't do nothing. You gotta, the light bothers you, so you gotta, just rest your head for a few days.
Yeah, I had a migraine for 3 days.
Oh, that's awful. I hate that.
I couldn't even stand.
Yeah, I've gotten headaches like that. It's almost impossible to recover from that. You can't do anything. That's the one thing I would always have to call out of work for, is because a headache, I can't function. You just can't comprehend things correctly.
So I'd say I have a few appointments to the doctor next week to try and find out what the hell's going on.
Are you feeling all right now?
Yeah. I'm still a wee bit sore. I don't know. I've still got a wee bit of a numbing pain since Tuesday morning.
Yeah, probably should go to a doctor then.
Yeah, so I have an appointment next week, and then bloods next week, and then the following week, go and see a doctor. So
yeah, good luck. Hopefully it's nothing serious.
Yeah, I'll be all right.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. You look like $1 million. You'll be fine.
I need to have a shave first.
Yeah, absolutely. Because hopefully Teasel's not there when you're there.
We'll make it to the doctors. You'll send me back again.
Be go clean yourself up, take a bath, and then you come back.
I come back again, yeah. Unless I've been showering every day, so just haven't been shaving, give me a break.
Yeah. He'll come with you with that razor. Oh my God, he wasn't even gonna put the soap on, which is crazy. He wasn't even gonna. He's like, nah, he can handle it.
He's a tough guy. He can take it. That's right. So he did. Yeah, with a cutthroat.
Yeah, I would not want to be the guy who's got to cut his beard. Are you kidding me? Do you see this guy? You were frozen on video for a second, but it wasn't audio. Well, maybe that's a sign.
Yeah, it could well be.
So, all right, I'll close it out. All right, guys, that's going to do it here for us on another episode of the Let's Talk podcast with me and David. We hope you guys enjoyed this episode of us talking about First Blood. And if you did, don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, share this video, and tell all your friends about it. And then we'll be seeing you guys around.